Okay, so my name is Chinedu Umba, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this session of Knowledge Hub seminars. Knowledge Hub is a brand of Jacksonite's Professional Development Series. The Jacksonite Professional Development Series is an initiative of the alumni of the University of Nigeria Nsukka Mass Communication Department. We've been running a series since 2021, and we recently launched Knowledge Hub. Knowledge Hub is a brand that focuses on adding capacity to the academia. And so we focus on all sorts of seminars on research and the like. Today's session is the second in the series. We ran our first last month. And so for today, we will be having three eminent scholars from across the globe talking on action research as a tool in development. And before we continue, I'd like to ask that you please mute your mics so that we can hear what they have to share. I'd also ask, if you don't mind, to have your cameras on, as I'll be taking a couple of pictures which we use for our reports. And this session is being recorded, so all participants will receive a link to the recording and a copy of the report, which we do about 2 weeks or so after the session. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have, and he's already spotlighted, Professor Charles Okibo. He is a Professor Emeritus of Strategic Communication at North Dakota State University. He is very passionate about teaching, and he gives so selflessly each time. Professor Okibo has been a registrar of the Advertising Practitioner Council of Nigeria, the Vice President of OBICOM, the UNESCO think tank at the University of Quebec, Montreal, Canada, as well as the Executive Coordinator of the African Council for Communication Education at the University of Nairobi, Kenya. Professor Okibo will be the lead speaker today. We also have with us Professor Nuru, and I will highlight Professor Nuru. Just give me 1 second right there. As soon as I get Professor Nuru. Professor Nuru is of the University of Maiduguri, Nigeria. He is the head of Department of Mass Communication there. He holds a PhD in mass communication. Professor Nuru resides and lectures in Maiduguri. His teaching and research interests are in public relations, media and human rights, print media and new media. He is a member of the African Council for Communication Education and the Association of Communication Scholars and Professionals of Nigeria. Professor Nuru is a consultant to many NGOs and has served as a resource person and facilitator in several workshops in Nigeria. He has published widely in local and international journals. The next person I will be talking about here now is Kate Tulibaski. Kate is an assistant professor of practice at North Dakota State University in Fargo. She teaches courses in management and marketing and in the areas of consumer behavior, organizational behavior, leadership, and diversity. Her research surrounds issues related to employee well-being and the social responsibility of business. So it is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's event. And without much ado, what we will do is to get started. And so I will have Professor Charles Okibo. He will start us off. And here we go, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much, Chinedu. It's my pleasure to be with you again. Today I'm talking to you from Spain, where we are having Okibo family gathering. But I told them to go ahead with their socializing while I do what I'm more passionate about, which is talking with Jacksonites and my extended family of communication practitioners in Nigeria. I believe there may be a few people joining us from Ghana and Kenya, and they're all welcome. We hope in future this will be a really pan-African event that monthly will bring us together to share our experiences. Today's topic, which is action research, is very close to what many of us already do, even though we may not call it that. Action research is what it says. It's research about action. It is research that leads us to undertake specific actions. It is research that uses both qualitative and quantitative research methods to come up with solutions to pressing problems of the time. And our presentation this afternoon, this morning, for those of you in North America, we'll start with what action research is. And I will tell you, as I have already told you already, that it is research that leads to action. Then we'll talk about the origin or the history of action research. It's interesting to know that the term action research was actually coined by our great uncle, Kurt Lewin, who gave us gatekeeping theory. There are very few communication scholars who have not encountered gatekeeping theory. It came from Kurt Lewin, who also was the person who defined action research originally. In fact, in 2 weeks' time, when we package our presentation today into a PDF format, you will get the original article that Kurt Lewin wrote on action research. I hope you enjoy it. And then we'll talk about the rationale for action research. Why should we do action research? We should do action research because it leads to actions. The essence of doing research is for us to address problems. And in addressing problems, we plan to undertake specific actions that will redress the situation. That's the rationale. And then we'll talk about the mixed methods value of action research. Action research is not exactly mixed methods, but it enhances and also benefits from the application of using quantitative and qualitative data. We'll then talk about how do we do action research. We'll give you 10 steps that we begin from examining the situation to know that, in fact, action research is a good approach to that. And then you go on to collect the data, you go on to do your analysis, interpret the results, and then most importantly, come up with a communication plan, with an action plan of what to do to redress the situation. And then we'll talk about examples. This is the point where Professor Nuhu Gapsiso, our good friend from Maiduguri, we like to associate closely with our people in Maiduguri because they're going through a lot. The university has been challenged in many ways because of the crisis situation in the Northeast. But we are happy to have Nuhu Gapsiso today here with us. Technology permitting, he will be talking to us from Adamawa, where he is spending the immediate period now. And then after Nuhu has told us about the applications of action research in the Northeast, where they are using it extensively in studying the IDPs, internally displaced persons, who are being plagued these days, particularly by teenage pregnancies among them. But Nuhu and his team of researchers there in Maiduguri and the Northeast are using action research to address many of the problems confronting the IDPs. Professor Kate Tulibaski has been working with me using action research for more than 15 years at North Dakota State University. She started in communication, but she's now in business. She's a professor of business administration at North Dakota State University, and she will give us some examples of application of action research in the business scene. Because action research is critical in doing management consulting, one of the skills we hope that Nigerian lecturers and professors of communication will adopt. With ASU being on strike for more than 5 months now, nearly every lecturer should be engaged in some form of consulting. Consulting is not esoteric. It's not solving mathematics, but it's using our skills to address problems that are germane to the interests of our clients. And those clients can be nonprofit organizations, they can be governments, they can be individuals, they can be institutions. Now, it's important for lecturers to know how they can use research methods, particularly action research methods, to address pressing problems that we get them paid. Now, there is nothing more beneficial in academia than teaching students and also engaging in management consulting and getting paid for those services. After Kate has given her presentation, I will come back and summarize our discussions. Just to remind you again what action research is. It is research that leads us to undertake actions. And then we will conclude and provide some recommendations. Among the recommendations will be Kurt Lewin's 1946 publication, where he defined action research for the first time. So that's the outline for today. Now that you have the outline, we can go straight into our presentations by talking about action research, what it is. As I already hinted, action research is the kind of research we undertake so that it will lead us to specific actions. In fact, it is the most applied and the most practical method of doing research, because research is aimed at coming up with genuine results, evidence-based recommendations of what we can do about the situation. And in doing this, action research is the best way we can collect data. The data could be qualitative and or quantitative, analyze the data to come up with results. But more importantly, use our results to make recommendations, which in action research we call a plan of action. What do we do about the situation based on the results we have derived? So action research helps us to explore practical problems quantitatively and qualitatively with the aim of developing solutions. There is nothing more important in research than coming up with results that can lead us to address the problems and ideally come up with actionable solutions. Let's move on to further explanations of action research. Like mixed methods research, action research uses both quantitative and qualitative methods. The key thing is for us to do the analysis, come up with the results, and go beyond just publishing in journals or publishing our thesis or dissertations or producing reports for our clients. With action research, we're interested in implementing the results so that some action will be taken. It is the kind of research that leads us to do something, not just to know about the problem or to make recommendations, but more importantly, to engage in some specific actions. So even though action research started in education, as you will soon find out in the UK and in the US, it has now been found applicable in many areas. Wherever you have people behaving, we can apply action research, which is why we recommend it highly in communication. And Professor Nuhu Gapsiso in Medugri is using it already, not only in supervising masters and doctoral students, but also in consulting for national and international nonprofit organizations that are interested in what's happening in the Northeast. So action research started in education, but it has expanded to many other areas. We can move on to the next slide to talk about the origin and history of action research. As I told you earlier, action research is very closely associated with our great uncle, Kurt Lewin, who gave us gatekeeping theory. And in fact, he coined the term action research in the 1930s. And he is famous for saying that many human relations problems should be addressed by taking action. And taking action means using research to come up with results that will lead us to specific actions. There are usually 4 steps involved in this. There is need for us to plan. There is need for us to engage in acting. There is need for us to observe what's going on and then reflect on that. Kurt Lewin's idea about social relations was borrowed by people in education, and action research became the main mode of teaching and research in Columbia University's Teachers College, and also at the Tavistock Institute in the UK. I think going forward, Nigeria in particular, but Africa generally, should be a central site for our use of action research. Since the 1970s, there has been an explosion of research using action research. And there has been an explosion of journals that like to publish special editions on action research. 2 specific journals of interest are Action Research, which was established in 2003 by Sage Publications. It's one of the highly refereed and impact factor journals. The second one is International Journal of Action Research. Between these 2 journals, it's easy for us to publish our materials from Nigeria because there haven't been many contributions from Nigerians using action research. In 2 weeks' time, when we package our presentations from this webinar, we will include 2 special publications, 2 special articles. One will be the original article by Kurt Lewin, published in 1946. And the second one will be an article I did on action research with 2 of my doctoral students in 2009. So look forward to our publication in 2 weeks' time in PDF format, where you will see these original examples of action research being used to publish in journals. Let me now move on to rationale. Why should we do action research? Why action research? I think if you've been listening to what I've been saying, it's obvious that action research is not complicated. It's not difficult. It's recommended because it's practical and it's applied. As the name says, it's the kind of research that leads us to take action. That's one of the major reasons why we undertake action research. Secondly, action research fosters involvement of different people, constituents, as co-researchers. When you read my article with my students, you'll find that we use the term co-researchers extensively and liberally, because unlike traditional research, where you collect information from your subjects, in action research, we see those subjects as co-researchers. They are researching with us. They join us in collecting data. We involve them in the analysis. We consult them again when we are interpreting the findings. So action research is recommended because it recognizes the importance of research subjects and appreciates their knowledge. They are not just passive suppliers of data, but rather they are active engagement of people who are involved in data collection, data analysis, and interpretation of results. So action research is valuable again because it promotes academic and practitioner interchange. It promotes working with journalists, who are the people who produce the news, but at the same time working with teachers who teach journalism, who are in the process of developing new ways of teaching it. So action research is valuable because it promotes collaboration between academics and practitioners, which is one of the motives behind the establishment of ACCE and ACSPN. And therefore, these 2 associations should indeed be promoting action research. Action research also promotes what we may call a progressive ideology, because it's often thinking about how do we bring about change. What changes can we bring about in society? How can we make improvement in what is going on in our society? And by so doing, action research is a progressive philosophy that says change is possible, and that change should not just come from the top and be dictated downwards, but rather it should be lateral and it should be vertical, because even change beneficiaries are also knowledgeable and therefore should be consulted when we are thinking about proposals for change. Action research, there are other reasons why we should do action research. And one of them is, as I told you, it sees research subjects as equals in the generation of data and in the analysis. And therefore, it leads to better understanding of the situation. It also places knowledge from research results at the disposal of the people who feel the problems, as well as the people who come up with policies that will address the problem going forward. And then results from action research lead to improvement in practice. And the improvement can also lead to generation of new knowledge that can lead us to formulation of practice-oriented theories. As you can recall from gatekeeping, even though it's a communication theory, talking about how news passes through the various gates in a newspaper house, it's practical and theoretical. That's a typical example of action research. So the results we derive from action research help us to improve practice, but they also help us to improve knowledge by creating theories. As Kurt Lewin famously told us, he said there is nothing more practical than a good theory. It's not true that theories are one side and practice is the other side. No, both of them are complementary. And there is no better tool for improving our theories than using action research, because it recognizes and places high value on practice. Above all, the most important thing for us to know about why we do action research is that it is not too difficult to do. In fact, some detractors say it is common sense and not research, but this is not true, because action research can use the most sophisticated research methods you can apply, as long as they are relevant. So action research doesn't mean it's pedestrian. No, it's not. It doesn't mean it's only common sense. No, it uses common sense, but at the same time, it uses the most sophisticated research methods if they are appropriate. Let's move on to action research and mixed methods, because this series of webinars from Jacksonites is actually aimed at teaching us mixed methods. As we discussed last month, mixed methods is the kind of method where we combine quantitative and qualitative approaches, but in a strategic way. It doesn't mean any which way of combining qualitative or quantitative, but rather it is being strategic in our selection of appropriate quantitative and qualitative approaches. And in doing this, if we use action research, you can find that they are complementary, that the best applications of action research will benefit more when we use mixed methods, because as we know, mixed methods help us balance the advantages and disadvantages of those two approaches. And so when we apply them in action research, we can be sure that the results we are deriving are indeed the best ways of tackling those problems. Let's move on to the essential elements of action research. What are the essential elements? There are many, but we've just isolated only 4 of them for the purposes of this webinar. When you get our full presentation in PDF format in 2 weeks' time, you will find that there are many elements. But the most important element is for us to identify a problem area that deserves our attention. In identifying the problem area, we identify the problem situation. What is the cause of this problem? Can it be addressed through specific practical actions. And in doing so, sometimes we look at what other researchers had done about this. And so identifying the problem will also include doing some literature review to identify what kind of research had been done in this area. Secondly, the second element is data collection, which is what we do in traditional research, the same thing we do in action research. We collect quantitative and or qualitative data, usually from multiple sources, because there is no source that has a monopoly of knowledge. And we are humble enough to know that even the simplest sources can provide very valuable information. And we use different methods. In action research, we use quantitative, qualitative as appropriate. And then we know that we can do interviews, we can do surveys, we can do experiments, we can do historical. All kinds of data analysis, data collection methods are appropriate, but we don't engage them because we know them. We engage in those ones because they are appropriate for addressing our problem. And then as in traditional research, we do the analysis and then come up with our results. The most important thing in action research is for us to go beyond making recommendations and come up with an action plan. What do we do now that we know about the problem of teenage pregnancies in IDPs in Adamawa and Maiduguri area? The most serious problem there is young girls in the camps getting pregnant. What do we do? It's not enough for us to say these are the factors, these are the reasons, these are the causes. We must come up with actionable plans of how to prevent, of what to do to manage, or how we can improve the situation, which is why action research is highly recommended in management consulting. That's what Nuhu Gapsiso and his colleagues are doing with the IDPs. It's not just making recommendations and putting this in their reports. They have to go beyond that and think about what can we do to prevent these problems? What can we do to ameliorate the situation? What can we do to improve? Because solving one problem often leads you to another problem. And as you soon find, action research is ideal in those situations where one problem leads to another. Let's move on to another essential element of action research, which is the recursiveness. By being recursive, we say that action research never ends. It's like in management consulting, we don't want to solve a problem with finality, and that's the end of it. It means you'll be out of a job. Action research is ideal because it's recursive. It's recursive because it's cyclical. Problems in the real world are not non-linear, and they are not such that we just end in January or end in May. And so, because problems are ever evolving, moving from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, action research is ideal because action research has the characteristic of being recursive. Action research is not neat like a simple survey. It's not orderly like a simple interview. It's not linear like just one simple experiment, but rather it is a process of repeating and revising procedures and interpretations, because our results address the situation as it is today. And when we implement our results, we will get a new situation that will now require us to collect a new set of data and do a new analysis to come up with new recommendations that will lead us to second phase actions. But those second phase actions will lead to a new situation that will require us to collect new data on this second phase and then do the analysis on this new second phase data so that we can come up with recommendations that we will implement. That's what we mean by recursive. It never ends. We keep going, improving each time, and knowing that a solution of a problem can lead us to a new problem. And for example, in the IDPs, the most pressing problem now is teenage pregnancy. When we solve that, You find that we now have teenagers who are sitting at home and not going to school. We have a new problem. And the new problem may be we should now provide education for them. And then if you provide education for them, that will lead you to a new problem. And so action research is ideal for management consulting. And that's why we recommend it highly. Let's move on to a diagram that shows that action research never ends. This is what we call the action research spiral. It's called a spiral because it begins with looking at the situation, doing a situation analysis to know what is happening, and then thinking about what to do to address the problem, and then taking some action. These three activities we repeat from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 ad infinitum. The problems never end, and our data collection will never end, but we collect different kinds of data that will lead us to coming up with different recommendations, which, because it's action research, we must involve in some specific action plans. What do we do? It's not just writing up a report. It's not just publishing a journal article. It's more important for us to do something with these results so that we will achieve some solutions. Let's move on to how do we do this? How do we do action research? We do action research in 4 main steps. First, identify the problem. Second, collect the data. Third, do the data analysis. Fourth, make recommendations which you implement. But these 4 steps can be extended into these 9 specific research activities. The first of which is determine that action research is indeed the most appropriate design. We can't assume that action research will apply in every research situation. So the first thing you do is to determine that action research is the best method for us to engage in addressing this problem. And then secondly, you provide a problem statement. What is the problem? What is the origin of this problem? How did it develop to where it is today? Provide a situation analysis. What are the sources of this problem? And then the third is to identify the resources needed. What do I need if I want to do action research? This is the stage where we would like to find out what other researchers like us had done. And then we consult with experts. Nuhu, in working with the IDPs, knows that he has to work with government officials, he has to work with UNICEF, he has to work with parents, he has to work with religious groups. And so you have to identify the different resources that you have to call up to join you in the task of understanding what's going on so you can make actionable recommendations. Fourthly, you identify the sources for data. Where will data come from? Ideally, quantitative and qualitative. That's the sense in mixed methods. Ideally, triangulation, so that you are not using only one type. And importantly, pay attention to validity issues. Make sure that the data you are collecting are relevant and appropriate, and they address the problem we are discussing. Not just because they are convenient or because they are valuable, but because they are the best ways we can get information about the problem. And then number 5, we implement data collection. We collect our data, knowing sometimes that it's not linear. It's not just go there, collect data, go home and analyze. Sometimes you collect data and you find it's incomplete. You go back and collect more data and you find that there may still be something missing. And you go back and you talk to the sources of the data and involve them in the data collection, which is why one of the best models for action research is called participatory action research. Participatory implies that the researcher is involving the research subjects, the community members, different partners as participants in the data collection process. So the 6th step is analysis. Having collected the data, how do we analyze them appropriately? Analyzing quantitative differently than qualitative. And having analyzed, it's important for us to develop an action plan. That's a critical element in action research. What is the action plan? What do we do about these young girls who are getting pregnant at 11 years old? It's important for us to develop an action plan. How do we prevent it? And what do we do about those who are already parents, who are already children having children? What do we do about them? So develop an action plan. And then number 8 is for us to share our findings. It's very important for you to share your findings. Even though your critical role is to implement action, but it's important for you to share your findings. I believe Nuhu Gapsiso and his colleagues in UNIMED are now in the process of combining all the results from their action research, and they are getting ready to share these with relevant government agencies, including the National Assembly, because policymakers should know what's happening so they can formulate appropriate policies. So a critical part of action research is sharing our findings, not just publishing as thesis or dissertations or in journals or in books, but getting to share what we found with the people who are involved and the people who make policies. 9th step is for us to evaluate what just happened. What did we do here? What worked and what didn't work? What changes can we make? And then finally, we get to 2nd phase. As I told you, action research is recursive. It's recursive because phase 1 leads us to phase 2. As a management consultant, this is an enjoyable part of your practice because it means you still be in business. And with action research, phase 1 leads to a 2nd phase of the contract, which will be renewed, and hopefully you'll be paid more because you are now an expert and you know more about the situation than anybody else. And hopefully your recommended actions are yielding some good results. So action research is ideal for individuals who are teaching because it makes them consultants. And in being consultants, they are doing what they were taught in school, which is using data to address problems. But more importantly, they are getting paid. It's not a bad thing to get paid for your knowledge. It cost us a lot to get to where we are today. And so no matter how much we earn by using the knowledge we have, we should be proud of it. And any lecturer who doesn't have a sidekick, who doesn't have a hostel, who doesn't have something else they are doing in addition to teaching, is cheating themselves, because being a consultant makes you a better teacher. You learn from the consultancy, and what you learn can be used in the classroom. And then your consultancy benefits from your classroom teaching, because what you teach students must be applicable to the problems of society. So action research is ideal for individuals. It's recommended for organizations, for them to understand what's happening. It's highly recommended for institutions, so that they will understand how they can make improvements. And the entire society benefits from using research to address its problems, so that the problems will be evidence-based in the recommendations provided for action. So action research is actually the best tool for personal, organizational, and institutional development. Having given you a very brief but broad outline of what action research is, how we do it, and why it's relevant to teachers and students today, let me now hand over to my dear friend, Professor Nuhu Gapsiso from the Department of Mass Communication, University of Maiduguri. Professor Gapsiso.
Thank you so much, Professor Kibo.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kibo.
Questions. Yeah.
Yes, we will. And I'd like to introduce Chuks and Warem. Dr. Chuks and Warem will take over the moderating. Chuks, over to you.
Yes, well, thank you so much. And good evening again from Nigeria here. Prof, thank you so much, sir, for that brilliant overview. And thank you, everybody who has been glued to this this session. I want to apologize profusely for not being able to join at the beginning when I should. It's technology that I battled with. Right now, I am back on seat. I thank the prof for holding for me all this while. So we will now move to some questions and then discussions, because all that Prof has said, I'm sure a lot of people are itching to ask one or two questions and make contributions. So before they lose track, excuse me, I want us to indulge them to now fill their questions. So I want to open the floor for questions or discussions to follow.
Chooks, we have something from Ebenezer Ajayi. Ebenezer, do you want to unmute yourself and pose your question?
He wants to speak, right?
Very well.
Okay,
yeah,
go
thank
ahead.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for this privilege. I was asking when Professor Kibo was presenting, I think on the third slide, he talked about action research involving planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. And what came to my mind was OTS, which also involves synthesizing, analyzing, reasoning, comprehending, application, and evaluation. So I was trying to ask if action research re-echoes OTS, or maybe it's just an overlap with OTS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ebenezer.
Chooks, let's take all the questions all at once.
Okay, sir. Okay. So, Prof, you are noting the question.
Then we have Anyekang. Anyekang, Ezekiel posed put a comment there. Anyekang, did you want to speak to your comment?
Good evening from here, Prof.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah. So I enjoyed the lecture until you got to the point where you said that action research is recursive, and I just started thinking. So you solve one problem only to meet another one, and you just keep, each time you solve one problem, a new one. You know, you meet a new one and then solve for it. So I was like, this is not what I want to spend my whole life doing.
Thank you, Anyekang. And then we have Dr. Isa Momo. Dr. Isa Momo, do you want to unmute yourself? Dr. Momo? Okay, while we wait for you to unmute, Chooks, we've got Musa, Luca Musa. You've got your hand up. Luca, go ahead.
Musa, right? Okay, Musa,
You're muted. Musa,
you.
you're muted. Unmute yourself.
So as looking at the elements of action,
Sorry, we didn't hear you, Musa.
We didn't hear you, Musa.
Chooks, I recommend we go ahead. Anybody who hasn't asked their question can send it to you or put it in the question box, and we will address them in the next 2 weeks. So they watch out for the answers to their questions in the package we will send out in the next 2 weeks. Instead of wasting time, you can't rely on technology. Yep.
It's okay. And actually, it's about 7 minutes to 5 o'clock.
Yeah, so we are taking a lot of time, and I can't trust my connection from Valencia, Spain. I'm not in the US today, so let me deal with the 2 questions. The others can send in their questions either directly to me. You have my email address, or to Chooks, or to Professor Mba. But send us as many questions as you like, because Tulipansky, Gapsisio, and I will enlarge on our presentation after today and send you the entire package. Yeah. Ebenezer Ajayi was asking whether action research is similar or different from hers. There is no direct relationship between them. All you have to do is think about, there are different ways of skinning a cat. You can't skin a cat in only one way. Similarly, when we are dealing with social problems and methods of collecting data and analyzing, there is no one paradigm that trumps everything else. Look at when did they originate? Who used them? Action research originated in the 1930s. The article I will send you from Kurt Lewin was written in 1946. And then think about any other similar paradigms. When did they develop? Was it Kurt Lewin who borrowed from them, or were they the people who borrowed from Kurt Lewin? But it's not a historical question that says which one came first and then which one embraced the other. There is more than one way. If you are following our seminar series, you'll find that we began with mixed methods, didn't even think about action research. And today we are saying action research is critical. If you are doing mixed methods, think about doing the kind of research that will lead you to address specific problems. And then Anyekon talked about the recursive nature of action research, which is ideal. In fact, that's the reason why many of us like it, especially if you're a management consultant. If you're a management consultant, at the end of every consulting session, you let your clients know that the problem is not. You let your clients know that the problem hasn't been solved in finality. That's the only reason you can expect a new contract. If the problem is solved once and for all, my friend, you're out of a job. And so the best consultants can tell you, I've been working with this client for the last 20 years. And I hope I will continue to work with them for the next 20 years. Because the more you work with them, the more reliable they find you, the more you know about them, the more you can be helpful to them. But if it was a once and for all kind of engagement, my friend, you should be looking for new clients every time. In my days at APCON, when I was the registrar of APCON, I knew that the best successful agencies were those who had long-lasting clients. If you got USC and you are sure they will stay with you for the next 20 years, you can hire 20 people in one day. But if you had Coca-Cola and you are not sure they will renew the contract at the end of 1 year, you won't hire one person. So the cyclical nature of action research is what makes it, the recursive nature, is what makes it recommendable to clients. Nuhu Gapsiso teaching communication in Maiduguri, but making some money. Working for IDPs, for international organizations, for the federal government, for Borno state government, for religious organizations, for individuals. He's happy that there is a research method that will lead him from doing one thing to doing another, to hoping that there will be another phase of this problem. And being an action researcher, I should be able to redefine this problem and collect new data that will give us new results that will lead us to doing something different from what we did last time. Each time addressing a pressing problem, not one you invented or not one that is convenient, but one that is critical. You must solve it. If you solve the problem of teenage pregnancy among the young girls in IDPs, and there is no other problem, you're out of a job, my friend. And that's not what I'm praying for you. I'm hoping that you'll be able to see that one problem leads to another, up to debt. But even beyond debt, the money you left behind must be managed. The people you left behind must be taken care of. And so even after you've died, the problems don't end. And it's our job as management consultants to find ways to make sure that we are always in demand. So, Anyekon is a good thing that action research is recursive. It's not a bad thing. So, over to you.
Okay, very, very great, sir. Well, thank you for that elucidation. I'm so happy to hear that once you start with action research, you continue to reap from it. That said, we will now go to the next presentation, which I hope can be done in less than 20 minutes. We have Professor Nuhu Gapsiso, from Maiduguri. He is Action Research in Communication, Consultancy, and Organizational Change. Let's listen to this professor. Professor, please, you are on.
Good afternoon from Nigeria. Thank you. Can I have the second slide, please? Prof has already said a lot about what action research is, why action research. So I won't belabor you with that one. So I'll go straight to the few examples I have from Maiduguri. In the Department of Mass Comm, University of Maiduguri, we are not seriously into action research. So some examples will suffice now. I think the third example will be the one that will drive home the point that action research is very, very important, especially in our situation in the Northeast. Insurgency started with terrorism insurgency, and it appears the problem is not abating. One example I have decided to pick on is a study by Dr. Amina Abana, her MSc dissertation. It was on the Nigerian press coverage of maternal health issues as the fifth goal of the Millennium Development Goals. She analyzed about 282 editions of The Guardian, New Nigerian, This Day, and Daily Trust newspapers from 2001 to 2007. She wanted to know the coverage of maternal health issues. And her findings indicate that, indeed, the issue was not covered as it should by the aforementioned newspapers, and the prominence was not given to the coverage of the issue. So her argument was that because the Millennium Development Goal did not achieve its aim, that was why government came up with the Sustainable Development Goals. So if we are talking about action research, yes, a research has been conducted on how the media covered these issues. And because the issues were not given prominence, were not covered extensively by these newspapers, she concluded that that might have been one of the factors that is responsible for the MDG not achieving its goal. But I don't think that is true. There may be other factors outside the media. Then the second example is can we go to the second example, please? Is a study by Dr. Abdul Muttalib Abubakar. What he did was to analyze political actors' engagement with social media in Nigeria. He studied the 2011 presidential election, 2015 and 2019 presidential election. He used mixed method. He used in-depth interviews, content analysis, and document analysis. He found out that political actors engagement with the social media is there, and that among the social media platforms they engage most with is Facebook and Twitter. But however, he said that the engagement seemed to have improved during the election, and that even the electoral management body and civil society organizations recorded increased engagement with social media in the elections. But however, he discovered that after the APC won the election and got to power, there was a decrease. There was a decrease in its own engagement with the social media. And that in engaging with the social media, they often face challenges ranging from bullying poor internet connectivity, and fake information, which are some of the factors that limit their engagement with social media. Perhaps that may explain why they are not engaging much with the social media. And that another issue with engaging with the social media is the fact that the engagement is mostly one way. In fact, at a point in time, the president on his Twitter handle was communicating to Nigerians, but he was not giving the Nigerians that benefit of doubt to ask questions, to respond to some of the messages he has posted on his page. Then, having undertaken this research, Dr. Abdul Mutabi is currently working on a model of political actors' engagement with the social media. Perhaps if it comes out, it will generate some discussion that will result to perhaps another research by another person somewhere. Then the research that I will focus on about IDPs is a research that we conducted with Borno Coalition for Democracy, Bokode. That research was a peace research project. We discovered that during the onslaught on the insurgents, many of them were forced to give up their arms, surrender themselves to the military. And those that surrendered themselves to the military were taken to a rehabilitation center in Gombe. But why did we even venture into this research, peace research, project research? What informed our research is the fact that after rehabilitation, communities were finding it very difficult to accept the repentant Boko Haram members into their communities, partly because of the perception that the sins committed by this repentant Boko Haram is such that cannot just be forgiven overnight. And we also discovered that prior to their rehabilitation, some of these communities were not properly enlightened as to why these repentant militants who have been rehabilitated are sent back to these communities. So we set out to find out why there's resistance on the part of the communities in accepting back these repentant members of Boko Haram. So we focus on, can we go to the third example, please? We focus on young men, the elderly, and prostitutes, and ex-drug users in about 4 local government areas: Jere, Konduga, Kaga, and Maiduguri Metropolitan Council. Why we picked on those local governments is the fact that those local governments are local governments that, apart from being affected by the insurgency, they also play host to most of these IDPs. They were displaced from Goza, Bama, Dambua, and other places that were worse hit, especially northern Borno, that were worse hit by the insurgency. So we used 2 instruments, FGD and individual interview guides, to sample the opinion of the elderly, the female, and all these people, especially at risk on their perception of the repentant Boko Haram members and their willingness to accept them back into their communities. And the findings was that even as IDPs in host communities, they were not even accepted, partly because the people still see them as an extension of the insurgent. In fact, some of them see them as Boko Haram members. In fact, sometimes they're stigmatized. People hardly associate with them. People hardly accommodate them. In fact, even when they are accommodated, there is this discrimination against them. So when we found out that, one, that they are not accepting back the repentant members of Boko Haram, partly because they never trust them. They never believe that they've repented. They never believe that they will come stay peacefully in the community without causing any problem. It gave rise to yet another problem. So we came up with a proposal which was accepted, and we came up with another project named Smart Peace. The aim of Smart Peace is to encourage reintegration and dialogue amongst the people. So through integration, people have been sensitized to know that not all repentant members of Boko Haram are combatants. Some of them are informants, some of them have been forcefully conscripted into the fold of the Boko Haram. So it was not as if they joined the group on their own, but they are forced into. And during the course of the research, we were also made to understand that even at the rehabilitation center, it's not all those who repented and find their way to the Operation Safe Corridor that are rehabilitated and sent back to the communities. In fact, even at the rehabilitation center, there are hardened ones. There are hardened ones that are not even kept in Gombe. They are moved to Niger State. There is yet another facility there where the hardened ones who hardly show remorse are kept there. So right now, the Smart Peace is on, and it was what? A product of the action research. Apart from Smart Peace, there's also, we've also been able to encourage youth in those communities where this research was undertaken, because it was a fallout of the research that some of them were forced to collaborate, to join insurgency, partly because of lack of what to do. So we've empowered youth in those communities to set up what we Christian Youth Peace Platform, YPP. The aim of YPP is to enable these youths to be self-reliant. Soft loans were given to them to establish businesses from where they could be sharing the profit, they could be teaching others handcrafts that they will engage in to raise funds to support themselves. Then apart from that, the YPP are also a group of youths that help to protect their communities against attack, because they already know the insurgents, they already know those who collaborate with Boko Haram. So it's easy for them to identify these insurgents whenever they infiltrate their communities and to hand them over to the law enforcement agencies. In fact, what we did was to ensure that there's collaboration between the YPP, the Nigerian police, the Nigerian army, and other vigilante groups like the civilian JTF, the CJTF, that has been assisting the military in its ongoing operation against the insurgents. So what are we saying? Action research can help you to identify a problem, can help you to find a solution to that problem. But without action research, we wouldn't have known that this is the situation on ground. We wouldn't have known that these are the challenges that even the IDPs are facing. We wouldn't have known that, yes, the host community is not accepting the repentant members, partly because they don't trust that they've truly and genuinely repented. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Why is action research important for management consulting? In the first step, what a consultant does is to conduct a preliminary research to find out the situation, to find out the challenges that are on ground. Then in the second case, the external change agents, some of these preliminary research may give rise to what? A marketing study in order to identify clients who may be interested in the organization's what? Product and services. And also in doing so, you do casual and formal information gathering during the initial meetings, especially between the client and consultant. Next slide, please. So for internal consultants, the preliminary research happens when you want to build trust, especially when management want to obtain managerial commitment, especially in bringing about change in the organization, especially if there are challenges in that organization. How do they come up with change? They have to what? Build trust between them and their employees so that whenever they introduce change, there will be no resistance. Then during this period, the consultant also what? Learn about the organization's problems and opportunities, and then they can now inform client about the methods and then the benefits that action research process will benefit the client as well as the organization. Next slide. It will be erroneous for us to believe that action research can fix a problem as quickly as possible. No, action research cannot immediately fix a problem, or it cannot help patch up an organization that is already on its knees. No, instead, action research is an ongoing process of what? Renewal. It can help the organization to come up with new ways to address some of its own challenges, address some of its own problems. And then action research, like I said, is an ongoing process of what? Renewal for organizations that need to optimize their performance. They need to improve on their performance. They need to optimize their health. Next slide. Action research for successful organizational change. One is the fact that it adopts what? A systematic approach to problem resolution and dealing with changes, especially in the business environment. Economic situation can affect business. So for it, it can now adopt a method of trying to address the problems that have arisen. Then it also assists in analyzing issues. And then it can now come up with interventions that can help address some of these challenges. Then action research is also what? Promote what? A learning culture. There may be problems here and there as you go, as you make progress. There may be challenges that will come up. So you can now learn from these challenges so that you can avert a future occurrence. Then it also what? Involve senior leaders and various stakeholders so that together they can decide to look at the situation at hand and then try to come up with solutions to the situation. Then aside from that, it also what? Facilitates collaboration between various stakeholders within an environment. Then aside from that, action research can also what? Help to improve the performance in all areas within that organization. Next slide. Lastly, what are the advantages of action research? I've heard somebody saying, well, if action research addresses a problem, another problem comes up. So what are the advantages? The advantages of action research is high level of what? Practical relevance of the business research. When you undertake a research, you identify a problem and then you try to solve the problem. You try to solve the problem. The experience you garnered from solving another problem will equip you with the requisite skill to deal with any other problem that may arise in the future. It is also what? Amenable to quantitative as well as qualitative data. You can do quantitative as well as qualitative. Prof spoke about that. Then there is also the possibility that you gain more knowledge about the problem. I remember whenever we want to teach our students on identifying a problem, we tell them that identifying a problem is from the known to the unknown. And we tell them that the unknown is the problem. You already know this, but what is it about the issue that you don't know? Action research can help you to find solutions to a problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chooks. Do we have any questions or comments for Professor Gapsiso? Oh. Okay, thank you, Professor Gapsiso. So like we did say earlier, if you have questions, write down the questions, or you can send them by email. I'll put my email in the inbox. Okay, great, Chooks, you're back?
Yes, I'm back. I didn't know I was
Right.
muted.
Oh, okay, we've got a question.
Thank you so
Mohammed
much,
has a
Prof.
question. Okay, there's a hand up, Mohammed. Mohammed Umar, do you mind unmuting yourself?
Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Mohammed.
And good evening, Prof. Good evening to my lecturer, Professor Lucas. So thank you for the wonderful presentation. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I just have a comment to make about he said actual research can help us identify a problem. And I think apart from identifying just a single problem, action research can help us identify a tip of a bigger problem. A particular problem identified by an action research conducted can be just a tip of bigger problem or bigger series of problems that may lead to longitudinal research that can be conducted over a long period of time. Have a series of researches that will follow such issue. For instance, for example, there is a research we conducted recently about generally still related to the issues of Boko Haram, especially about pupils in primary schools and secondary schools, especially in primary schools that have been psychologically affected by the situation, either IDPs or even in the host community. But we were able to identify that there are even series of problems that can be that require further researches, series of researches to be able to identify in details how those problems affect the pupils in schools and even the teachers themselves.
Okay, thank you so much. Are you true?
Yes, I'm true. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm sure Prof is taking notes. One more question from, I think, Dr. Isamomo. Let me read it. How do you identify as possible disadvantages of action research that should be guided against? That's from Dr. Issa Momo. I'm sure some other people have questions to ask. If not, can we listen to Prof?
Okay, thank you. Do you mind muting your mic, please? Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Professor Gapsiso. So I will spotlight Kate Tulibaski now. Chooks, over to you.
Okay, while we're waiting for responses, the last presentation will be by Catherine Tulibaski from North Dakota State University. Topic is action research in business. I'm sure a lot of people will be listening, hoping to listen to this to see how much they can make out of it. So, Prof, we're listening to you right away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It is morning, just late morning here in Fargo, North Dakota. If just for the sake of time, I'm going to rearrange a little bit of my presentation just to reduce any as much repetition and just to protect all of your time. So can I have you go forward 2 slides? I'm going to mess us all up here with the slides. One more. Perfect, thank you. So even though action research began in education and really, as we've seen from many of the examples, finds itself in community, very community, even city-centered politic type information, it has developed a good reputation in the business setting as well. And you can see on the slide here, just some disciplines or arenas in relation to business, in relation to some business issues that we can see action research play out. So things related to customer service. I know that was a question in the chat, you know, can this be even retention or satisfaction of certain groups of people? Things with innovation. So if an organization is looking at ways to innovate, or if they have innovated, how successful has it been and why or why not? Managing technology, human resource management, issues related to supply chain. Absolutely, organizational change is a big one. Finance, broader issues related to strategy, organizational development, and this kind of can tie in with innovation or any of the other arenas of business that I've mentioned. E-commerce and mergers and acquisitions, these are just some of them. And as we think about action research and how it's applied in a business and management scenario, I do want to add some repetition to just really hone in and remind us of the purpose of action research. And it's really twofold. One is to generate actionable knowledge, which is incredibly important and something that we've seen in Professor Gapsiso's presentation and Professor Okibo's presentation, is that it can't just be the research study that sits nicely in the journal on the bookshelf. It has to lead to some sort of action, and it has to be able to lead to some sort of action. And I loved the comment in the chat. I'm going to go back to it here because I don't want to mess up the wording. From the town to the gown that Dr. Isa Momo mentioned. That is really so great and a great way to put it. And it does make the research that we're really prime and trained to do in the academy more useful on the ground level to what people can see. So it really brings us there. The other thing that I think is really important to mention is that the purpose of action research is to address those important organizational, community, and social issues together with those who experience them. So it can't come from the gown, to use that same language. It can't just come from somebody looking on the outside and saying, ooh, it looks like you have a problem here. It has to come from someone and from a group of people who are experiencing that issue or who want to be involved in the change. And I think that's an important thing to mention because it's a very inclusive way to do research and to lead to change. So now if I can have you go back one slide, I'd like to share some examples from around the globe of action research that has happened within organizations. And I know Dr. Okibo mentioned the journal Action Research, and these examples are all outlined in a special edition that was published in 2019 in Action Research by Shawnee and Coughlin. So you can see these and just a whole slew of others that are kind of summarized pretty nicely in that special issue. But first is just an example that's centered on leadership development. And the action research process for this scenario was published by Bhatnagar in 2017. And the purpose of the action research project in this avenue was really to develop a leadership development strategy and to enhance the leadership development in all of the levels of the organization. And the context was actually in an automotive component of a manufacturing company that was based in India. And where it stemmed from was that the organization and the automotive department or component of the organization, more specifically, was experiencing really high rates of turnover in newly appointed high management positions. So these are positions that you needed a lot of experience, you needed a lot of good performance, but they were seeing that once these really reliable people were in this high or in this senior management role, they were experiencing greater levels of turnover. And we all know the price of turnover, both in productivity, both in cost, both in time. So that high rate of turnover led to more and more pressure for all of the other levels of the firm. So we know from the different systems, right, is that if we're losing our management, it's impacting everyone else. So what happened in this action research example is that there was an inside action researcher, so someone within the organization, and then there were consultants. So it really was a blending of the academic and the practical. So those inside the company requested the assistance of those outside of the company. And what they did is they wanted to look for ways to generate higher levels of engagement, to create openness, to create ownership, and to really improve the work relationship as a way to do it. So they engaged in action research through several cycles of research. And I know that, you know, the iterative nature can sometimes feel like you're beating your head against a wall, but it's not just that you're uncovering or waking up new problems. It's that you start to, every time you do something, you start to see the same problem a little bit more clearly. Or it's not that this one problem has one solution, but you say, okay, we're still focusing on this problem of high executive turnover, but it's not just one thing. And each iteration might expose a different facet of the problem, which actually is still working to solve that one problem. So what they did is they went through discovery. So figuring out what actually is the issue, what is leading to these higher rates of turnover in senior management. Then they developed measurable actions that could be taken. And some of them are just quick wins. You know, you don't have to go and overhaul the entire system, but maybe it's just, maybe we need to beef up our training a little bit. Maybe we need to have some more checkpoints. Maybe we need to enhance the, you know, the package for benefits or something like that. And then you reflect on it and you go through that process of discovery and actionable items and reflection or measurement. And you might do that you know, that cycle. And the committee that was working included individuals who led a specific function to department, and they were able to be the ones to go out and carry that through. And the outcome of this particular study was that the organization was able to develop a very clear leadership development strategy. So they were far more purposeful. They developed a strategy to become far more purposeful in equipping their senior managers to carry out the tasks that they really needed them to do. It also allowed for them to adopt a leadership competency framework, which is something that as academics, we know and understand theoretically. But if you don't have an academic background, you're not accustomed to those things. So you're able to translate then some of these leadership frameworks that we might be familiar with already into a very practical and useful guide to be used day to day for these. And that establishment of leadership development, it also a development program created a pipeline for delivering the business growth objectives throughout the entire organization. So this is a good example where we see a problem and we've got to figure out how to use the knowledge that we have and the resources we have with what's actually going on with the people that are experiencing it. And we create some solutions, some really tangible solutions. Another example is by Cantorino et al. In 2016, and this focused on the actual merger of two different companies. And this was action research that was more preemptive. So this wasn't in reaction to something going wrong, but this was saying, hey, let's set up an action research team or committee to try to increase the likelihood of a successful merger between two companies. So this was based in Italy, and it was inspired by the merger of two real estate investment companies that were coming together. And the merger was automatically viewed kind of before it even happened as strategically and financially successful. But there was strong concern that the actual integration, the cultural integration of the two companies was going to be more difficult. So what happened is they looked at the quality of relationships, and they brought up collaboration between members of the study team. So there were researchers, but then there were people from each of the original organizations, and all three then worked together to figure out what was going to work. So what they did is they really did like kind of 2.5 cycles, and this was a year-long process for this new company. And what they wanted to do is they spent a lot of time in that kind of knowledge and situational analysis stage and looked at the post-merger dynamics. So what were the dynamics in the culture like? What were the employees saying about some of the changes? And then they also wanted to map out what was the current culture, and then from the employees, what was the preferred culture of the organization? And where were we seeing that the current culture and the preferred culture weren't matching up? And where they're not matching up, then you include all of those people to develop answers and solutions as to where we can address some of those emerging issues. And what happened here is that at the end, the research really triggered learning across the organization. So it just put under a spotlight what needed to really be focused on and prioritized to create a successful merger culturally for the organization, because we all know that there's a big difference between a successful merger financially and on paper, and then compared to culturally. So it was really, really crucial to just be able to learn about what the organization needed. And then key processes were unified into the new company. So it wasn't just saying, well, company A was the more dominant or the larger, so we're just going to adopt company A's policies. It was really creating new policies where it called for it, because as company A and B come together, neither of them is the same as they used to be. And you really have to think of it as company C, this brand new company. And the action research process and the cyclical nature of figuring out what's working, what's not, what do we need to look forward to, was able to take a lot more proactive action to continue the success of the companies combined as one. And then the final one that I'll mention quickly is one about interorganizational innovations, and Eastrom et al. In 2019 published this study. In this one, the purpose of this action research endeavor was a learning study that was really focused on enhancing collaborative innovation in an interorganizational network. So trying to get different organizations to come together and work collaboratively in the name of innovation. And this was a network in Northern Europe that was bringing together vehicle and traffic safety. So bringing that together with automotive industries, et cetera. And what they examined here in terms of quality of relationships was, what do we need to move from a strategic network, so something where we get together and we strategize and talk about it, but to something that can actually transform how things operate and how things actually happen. So they went through the action learning process of questioning and reflecting that supported the network as a whole. And what they found at the end is that the collaboration led to more network learning, because you really were able to uncover with that process all of the different strengths that these different organizations had and where you should harness them to really be able to innovate together. So those are just 3 of the many examples. I tried to pick some more recent, but you could really examine all day different areas. If you want to go back to the last slide, please, or go forward 1 slide. So yeah, all of these different disciplines and arenas, we see action research play out. The biggest challenge of action research as it applies in business is that it's really the buy-in, is that if you don't have the buy-in from the upper management about the value of having members of your organization be involved, that it's not just a simple, let's have somebody else find that and let us know how it works, but it's very, very unique to organizations. And then when coupled together, the practical and the more academic work behind it, you can lead to lasting change. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kate, for that very incisive lecture. I'm sure participants may have some questions or comments to make. While we are waiting for that, let me just mention that we have a couple of activities more to go. As soon as the question and answer session is over, we will call on Professor Kibo to wrap up with the conclusions, summary and conclusions, and finally give us some recommendations for further reading. And thereafter, Professor Chinedu Umba will give us a vote of thanks. So any questions, any comments for Catherine? Okay, do we assume that the questions will go directly to Professor Kibo or to me or to Mba as recommended earlier by Professor Okibo? So, ladies and gentlemen, in the absence of immediate questions, I want to call on Professor Charles Okibo to give us a summary arising from the presentations today.
Okay, thank you very much, Chooks. The summary is simple. I think listening to three of us, nobody will be in doubt that action research is common sense, but it's more than common sense. It involves us to use appropriate research methods. They could be as sophisticated as experiments, or they could be as simple as just focus group discussions or in-depth personal interviews. The key thing is to use the most appropriate methods to collect relevant data that will be interpreted using both the people who supply the data and the researchers themselves. A key characteristic of action research is participatory approaches involving researchers and subjects and involving the communities that are affected by the problem we're examining. So the summary is action research is doable, action research is relevant, action research is informative, both at the individual level, because as researchers, we become more confident in what we think we know because we have evidence to support our hunches. And then secondly, we become more desired by our clients because they see us appreciating them and involving them in both in the interpretation of the results and in the design of the actions that will be taken using the results. Although some detractors might say that action research is just common sense and good judgment, we know it's more than that, particularly when we use mixed methods approaches. Because as I said before, we can be as sophisticated as the most sophisticated researcher. We can use all kinds of methods. We can use sophisticated statistical analysis. We can use historical methods. There is nothing that is out of bounds for use in action research. And so it's more than common sense and good judgment, even though it's based on them, because we are dealing with action that should redress the situations that we have studied. When mixed methods is used in action research, we end up with results that will resonate with our clients. And as we have seen, both in the IDP research, in the use of social media in elections, in the 3 case studies that Catherine gave us, Action research is applicable in many areas. It's not just in education where it started. It's not just in communication, which we teach, but in all areas, including election campaigns, including social issues, including IPOB or Boko Haram, including our attitude towards social issues. There is hardly any social problem that cannot be addressed using action research. But it's important for us to realize that our research is as good as our design. And in this series of webinars, we'll be talking about different aspects of mixed methods research, not just action research, but all the other aspects of mixed methods research. When you get our package in 2 weeks' time, we hope we'll be able to expand our presentation today, incorporating many of the discussions and many of the points you are raising in the discussion platform, and many of the emails that some of you will send us after this presentation, so that we can enlarge and incorporate some of the things that are of interest to you. But the recommended readings we provided, there are 4 of them. There are 4 recommended readings we recommend. Cresswell is very important because he's the leading expert on action research. Kurt Lewin, the 4th recommendation we gave, is his 1946 publication in the Journal of Social Issues. We have a copy of this and we probably produce it in its entirety. I think it's about 13 pages, and include it in the package we are providing for you in 2 weeks' time. So we hope you've enjoyed our presentation. We hope you've learned something. If nothing else, your students can use action research for their thesis and dissertations. But more importantly, you can use action research to start making money, or to start that, if you don't like making money, to start working for free to address some of the pressing problems of our communities in Nigeria and Africa. You can see that action research is practical, it's applied. You don't have to be a statistician to use action research. But if you are interested in statistics, you can use statistics to embellish your action research outcomes. So in conclusion, we hope we have got you interested in paying a little more attention to action research. And we hope you'll be looking forward to our package of both this presentation and some of the additional materials we'll add to it to make it a complete package for you all. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share these ideas with you today. Thank you, Chooks. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Prof. I'm very thank you so much for that summary and conclusion you have just given us. I must say that that's extra meat to chew from there. Thank you so much. I'm sure that some people may still have 1 or 2 questions to ask now, while others will be sending in their questions via email or via any other means. If somebody has a question, please ask now. Thereafter, Professor Mba will now give us a vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Andrew Odioko he had his hand up. Andrew, do you still have a question?
And also think Dr.
Mr. Odioko.
has a question.
Mr. Odioko, you can unmute and ask your question if you still have a question. No? All right.
Okay. I saw a note from Dr. Isamomo. Is he willing to speak now, to ask questions?
Dr. says the network is pretty weak there, so I guess not.
Can you read his message? No.
Let's see what he says. Says, thanks very much, Professors Okibo, Kate, and Gapsiso. I have learned so much and I'm highly enlightened. And Andrew says no question, just a technology glitch there. So thank you.
Okay.
And
So-
Mohammed Umar says, I think Catherine Gapsiso made an impressive presentation, very insightful. And Akiola Olayinka agrees. Yes. Professor Gapsiso, there's a question here from Musa for you. Not sure if you addressed it. Luca Musa is asking, you said action research promotes learning culture. In what way does this differ with other forms of research? Professor Gapsiso, do you mind responding to that?
How it differs with other forms of research is the fact that in action research, like it implies, is actionable. In fact, action research is mostly done in addressing an immediate problem. So that is the advantage it has over other research. As you do a situation analysis, you conduct a research and then try to find a solution to that problem. Like it happened in our case. We discovered that this was the problem and we applied for another funding, and Smart Piece is on and rolling now. So we've been able to address the initial problem we've identified. The people in those communities are living peacefully now without the initial challenges that they've encountered of not accepting the repentant members of Boko Haram into their communities. If you visit any of those communities where we conducted that research, you discover that it is quite different from other communities because there appears to be synergy, there appears to be collaboration, there appears to be reconciliation going on between them and the repentant members of Boko Haram.
Okay, thank you so much. This one is from Mando Dioko. Maybe he wants to repeat it. I just escaped it. More questions are arising. But Prof, do you think we should take all, or we just
well, we can stop here now.
Send in their questions as well.
Okay. Yes, I think
okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, Professor. Okay. I'd like to thank everybody, particularly the presenters. The next couple of seconds, Professor Mba will now give us a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Chooks, for moderating. And I'd like to thank our presenters, Professors Okibo, Professor Gapsiso, and Tobili Baski. And it's really important for me to share that all this work is pro bono. So people are giving of their time, of their knowledge, of their experience, and they're sharing it joyfully with us without charging us an arm and a leg. So thank you so much. I do appreciate that. And I also do appreciate the fact that our participants have taken the time out of their Friday to be here to learn. We do know that learning is truly important. And for that, I am grateful that we still have people in the society who are interested in improving themselves. I'd like to end by not just thanking you, but telling you about our next session. So the Knowledge Hub sessions come up on the first Friday of every month. So keep an eye out. We have another interesting package coming up on the 2nd of September, and the focus will be on qualitative research methods. And of course, we always make sure there are real-life applications to the discussions we have on this forum. So keep an eye out for the emails. As Professor Kibo already said, expect a package, a link to the recording, and also the PDF of the slides and further documents that will be shared. I'd also like to thank the people who work behind the scene to make this possible. The JPDS Knowledge Hub has working groups, and it's got a steering committee, and we've got rapporteurs, Treasure, and Ifeanyi Dinwoke, who work really hard to make this possible. I'd also like to thank our postgraduate students from the Mass Comm department of the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, who support this initiative also. So again, thank you from JPDS and Knowledge Hub. Kath, thank you so much. Charles, thank you. And Nuhu, thank you. Do take care, stay safe, and I'll see you again next month, September the 2nd. Thank you, Chooks. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you
See
very
you
much.
all. This time.
Take care.
Next
Thank
time.
you.
God bless you all.
Thank you.
God
Thank
bless
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye for
great.
now.
Bye.